We welcome you all for the next series of the webinar by Dr. Priya. Before that, I'd request Mr. Sunil from Group Pharma to start the webinar with his, I anticipate and I look forward for his speech.
Thank you
Welcome,
so much.
Mr. Sunil.
Thank you so much, sir. Very nice listening to your voice in the morning. It's very peppy. Thank you so much. And greetings to all the attendees. The numbers will start building up as we proceed. So today the focus will be on orofacial pain, a clinical perspective, part 6. I'm Sunil Chiplonkar. I'm with Group Pharmaceuticals, and we offer a range of products which are excellent and very, let's say, darling of the dentists. The Rashtriya Shikshana Samiti Trust is a trust which manages the RV educational institutions in Bangalore and across the state of Karnataka. The Rashtriya Shikshana Samiti was founded in 1940 by two idealists, Mr. Shivananda Sharma and Mr. Ranga Shetty, a businessman and philanthropist. In fact, these institutions have grown to become one of the iconic institutions of India, and the RV symbol is a very well noted one across the globe today. Rashtriya Shikshana Samiti Trust started with just 6 students in the year of 1940, and now today it is an educational ecosystem with 20 institutions. And there is inclusive education to all, right from schooling till higher education, everything is offered there. In fact, today RV has become such a part of Bangalore that you have got even an RV road and an RV metro station in Bangalore. RV has produced thousands of students from its institutions, including iconic achievers like IAS and IPS officers, like, for example, Vijay Lakshmi Bidri Madam. And noted personalities include Anil Kumble, Lakshmi Gopal Swami, who is a very popular actress, and so on and so forth. In fact, even the chairman of HAL, Ashok Naik sir, is from RV. So these are all the institutions under the Rashtriya Shikshana Samiti Trust, starting from RV College of Engineering to DAPM RV Dental College, and so on and so forth. There are pre-university colleges, schools, as well as even the RV Aster Hospital, which is now becoming an iconic place and a landmark place in JP Nagar. So DA Pandu Memorial RV Dental College and Hospital is located in JP Nagar, which is one of the important areas of Bangalore. So very well connected, not only through the metro, but also through other modes of transport. And this is considered to be a premium area in Bangalore. Affiliated to Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Karnataka, and recognized by Dental Council of India, the prestigious NAC A grade is allotted to RV Dental College. The college is well known for high competent and dedicated teaching faculty, and now led by Dr. Asha Iyengar Madam, Principal, RV Dental College. There are 19 departments, and the campus hostels are there for both boys and girls, and the mobile dental unit is used for community dental service. There is a Wi-Fi facility in the campus, a boardroom, 2 auditoriums, state-of-the-art library. A number of certificate programs, PD diploma programs, UG, lot of programs are offered, and there is even a MOU with Showa University, Japan. So awarded as the best dental college of the year 2019 with NAC A grade. RV Dental College has got 650 plus publications to its credit, 200 plus continuing dental education programs, 60 plus faculty, and 2000 plus students have passed from this college. In fact, there is a vibrant Facebook group also, which is the alumnus of this college. Continuing education is very important because it shows you are dedicated to your profession and you want to deliver the best for your patients. And this helps build credibility. So naturally, RV Dental College organizes and encourages dentists to take part in seminars and various educational courses. And thus, working with like-minded individuals will provide a great way to improve your own practice. So we encourage the entry of all the dentists for the dental education programs. which are offered by RV Dental College, including this webinar, which is, of course, contributing to the knowledge of dentists. There will always be something bigger and better, so why not be the first to know about it? So we have a lot of interesting speakers in this place. So India is now becoming a dental tourism center. Dental tourism, just like medical tourism, involves individuals who seek dental care outside their local healthcare systems. And it is growing worldwide because the world is becoming more interdependent, competitive. A lot of techniques are known across dentists across the world. A lot of materials are now available in all countries, and technological advances are spreading across the world. And there is significant cost savings. So, what the dental tourist can do is he can combine both the dental service as well as he can take up to some tourism package. So, this is one important aspect of dental tourism, which is now growing significantly. And these sort of continuing dental education programs help in the improvement of even services to the dental tourists. India today attracts patients from across the globe, like Australia, Africa, United States, Middle East, New Zealand, and so on. The dental clinics and hospitals here provide 24/7 services. Even the RV Dental College is offering world-class dentistry for dental tourists to have a great smile, which is, of course, bewitching, as we can see here in this. A lot of interesting products are available for improvement of the dental practice. This includes the mouthwash, fresh chlore, which reduces the viral load in the patients. Today, it is important to protect the dentist as well as his family. So, reduction of the viral load in the patients is important when taken up on the chair procedures. Omnident is another interesting one which reduces the clavicular fluid leakage by healing the gums, and thus there is a reduction in the viral load. It is important to understand for the public and everybody else on how to use a sanitizer or a wash of the hand. It should be between the fingers, the nails, as well as the thumb that needs to be washed. So that is how one uses the WHO hand washing technique. Avoid the contact greetings, and please remember, a smile is all it takes to turn a stranger into a friend. You never get a second chance to make a first impression, and the person who is going to help you create a smile which activates the release of good neuropeptides in your mind and makes your whole body as well as your mind happy through the dopamine and endorphin release is, of course, the dentist who can make you smile confidently. We like to see children smile, isn't it? That's because children smile 400 times a day, and that makes people happier. So happy people are adults who smile 40 to 50 times a day, but the average people smile only 20 times a day. Group Pharmaceuticals has always partnered with dentists to offer excellent products like Shy XT, Shy NM, which is the pioneer bioactive glass toothpaste, which can be used after dental filling too in the patient for layering effect. We have a fluoridated bioactive glass like Elsense. Omnident is the gum healer toothpaste to reduce the viral load in your patients, stabilize chlorine dioxide with fresh chlor. So we salute the dentist who is the smile and success creator. Please go to your dentist. The dentist is the most important person who can create a beautiful smile, and a beautiful smile can change everything. Thank you very much. And I now request Dr. Priya Madam as well as the dental team from RV Dental College to take over. Thank you very much. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sunil, for a wonderful talk. As always, you didn't disappoint me. I was, eager to hear your speech, which will always be something different from the last one. Thank you very much, sir, for such a good beginning. Now I request Dr. Priya to begin her webinar for today. And I think most of us know about Dr. Priya, who is settled in US, and she is alumni of the APM RV Dental College. And the last 5 lecture series was a wonderful attempt by Dr. Priya to make a complex thing such as orofacial pain into a very simple and easy to understand webinar. So we look forward for the further lectures of Dr. Priya by which students and other faculty members can have a glimpse of this complicated topic. Over to you, Dr. Priya.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Subhash. I will turn the screen share on. Just tell me if you can see the screen. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah, we can see a headache section.
Okay, all right then. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Just to recap what we have spoken about up until now, we have looked at TMJ disorders, we have looked at neuropathic pain. We are now moving on to my favorite topics, that's headache. In the headache section, my agenda is to talk about migraine in this class. Next class, we'll talk about tension type headache and medication overuse headache. And we'll finish up with trigeminal autonomic cephalalgias. My goal for headache section is to make you recognize common primary headache types. You may or may not be able to treat all the headaches that come to the door. Let's face it, most of the time when patients come to the dentist, they're really not asking for headache relief. No one's going to come to the doctor and say, and let me say this in Kannada, and I am sorry if not everyone speaks Kannada, Doctor, nan tale nota ide. No, doctor, my head is aching. Probably not going to come and say. They are probably going to come talk about their tooth pain or their dental concerns. But the twist in the tail is, if we have a chronic pain patient or a robust chronic pain practice, patients who come may have coexisting headache disorders that may or may not be recognized, much less effectively treated. You can and you should help get the patient the help that they need. So first of all, we are going to be talking about migraines today. And the topics that I want to cover are definitions and concepts, diagnostic criteria, pathophysiology, classification, neurovascular orofacial pain, red flags with headaches, and treatment options. So again, why should dentists care about headaches? Because sometimes dental pain can refer to the head, which happens to us all the time. We see that all the time. Many times, the differential diagnosis for non-odontogenic toothache can very well be a headache. I'll cover this in a little bit more detail in the last module of this particular section, but keep in mind that you want to keep headaches as a differential diagnosis. Like I said before, headaches can coexist in many chronic pain patients. And as a general rule, I feel knowing more is just better because we can do better for our patients. Now let's move on to definitions and concepts. The disorders with headache as a symptom is long and complex. Headaches are really hard, and I'm sorry to be Captain Obvious here. A patient may not check all the boxes for headache diagnosis. Headache diagnosis have some particular diagnostic criteria. So when you're interviewing the patient, getting a case history, they might not tell you all the symptoms that are listed in the criteria. Many times what happens, even with good history, it looks like maybe 2-3 different headaches happening at the same time. So this is where you have to put your differential diagnosis skills to test and arrive at a diagnosis by a process of elimination and trial therapy. Unfortunately, there is no one test or diagnostic aid that is 100% conclusive. So the most effective tool is communication and good history taking. I know I have said this many times. Let me say it again. The best tool that you have is communication and good history taking. Next, let's talk about primary headache. Primary headaches is where headache is the disease process, and it's classified according to symptoms. The most common primary headache disorders that patients suffer are migraine, tension type headache, and cluster headache. Even cluster headache is really not that common. It's actually a pretty rare headache, but it's not as rare as other trigeminal autonomic cephalalgias like primary stabbing headache, headaches associated with cough, with exertion or sexual activity, new onset persistent daily headache, or primary thunderclap headache. Primary headache, by definitions, are recurrent, experienced by the patient on multiple occasions. After repeated episodes of the same headache, can the diagnosis of primary headache be fully confirmed? The less common primary headaches are also recurrent, with the exception of primary thunderclap headache, but they require a lot of diagnostic workup to exclude other diagnoses. Vital to distinction between primary and secondary headache is that symptoms alone are not enough. Symptoms included in the diagnostic criteria for primary headache are also frequently present in secondary headache. Now, do you see why headaches are complicated? A patient can have a secondary headache with the same symptoms as primary headache. That's what makes things really difficult. So, the context in which the headache occurs is what helps you differentiate between primary and secondary headache. Remember, I said context is king. Context is king. So, when you're gathering history, be sure to gather the context in which the headache developed. In outpatient settings, secondary headaches are uncommon. So I guess that's a little bit of relief for us as dentists. But for people who work in ER or urgent care settings, they are not that lucky in that sense. Secondary headaches can mimic primary headaches, I just said that. And about 90% of patients with secondary headache also have a primary headache disorder and a normal examination. A chief example of that would be medication overuse headache, which we will talk about in the next class. So, establish a routine while you're doing your history taking. So, what does that look like? What are the headache questions? Or what are the history questions? Where is the pain located? When did it start? How long have you had them? How long does it last? Minutes, seconds, hours, or days? What's the quality? How intense is it on a scale of 0 to 10? What are the associated symptoms? Associated symptoms, you can ask the patient, is there runny nose? Is there redness of face? Is there redness in eyes? Is there ear fullness? A sense of swelling, tearing, and ptosis? What's this ptosis? It's eye swelling, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. But for right now, just remember the word ptosis. P-T-O-S-I-S, that's how it's spelled. And what are the association of the headache with sleep? Does the headache prevent the patient from going to sleep, or does it wake up the patient from sleep? That's another thing that you want to be knowing. What aggravates the pain? What relieves the pain? It's more or less the same questions that we have been asking and practicing ever since we started this just taking pain history. Have a routine, ask the same questions in the same order again and again. That way you won't miss anything. And this is what ptosis looks like. It's this eye right here on the left side. I hope you can see the difference. That eye looks kind of smaller than the right eye. Then there is redness. There is also a little bit of tearing. It sort of looks a bit swollen. I hope you can see that. And that's what ptosis is. Next, we'll talk about what secondary headache is. Secondary headaches are classified according to their cause. For secondary headache, headache is a symptom of an underlying pathology. Secondary headaches are unfamiliar or they are new to the patient. For diseases that are known to cause a headache, the disorder often occurs in close proximity to the onset of headache. So the headache is caused because of something else. It's not the disease in and of itself. The other concept or word to know about is CGRP, which stands for calcitonin gene-related peptide. So what is this new thing that I'm throwing at you? And it's an important thing to know because when we talk about headache pathophysiology, especially migraine pathophysiology and treatment, this comes into play. So it is a 37 amino acid neuropeptide. It's encoded by the CALCA gene, and it plays a role in the cardiovascular, digestive, and sensory activities. And the CGRP and CGRP receptors are there in many parts of the body, especially in the nervous system. And it's a vasodilator, it's a potent vasodilator, and it's seen in the meningeal blood vessels. When a patient is having a migraine attack, it's typically increased in the jugular veins. And if we try to give IV injections of CGRP to patients who already suffer from migraine, that can precipitate a migraine. But for people who are not migraineurs, it doesn't do anything. So again, remember CGRP, it is pretty important. Next, we will talk about migraines. First of all, what's a migraine? It's a common disabling neurologic disorder. It affects about 10% of the global population. That's really a lot of people. And according to International Headache Society, it's a recurrent primary headache disorder, results in attacks that last 4 to 72 hours. One thing that we have to remember about headaches is the duration of the headache many times helps you make a diagnosis. If a patient is having headache that's less than 3 hours, it's probably not a migraine. And if the headache lasts longer than 72 hours, I'm going to say it's probably not either. So when we talk more about tension type headaches and attacks, you will see each headache has a duration that's very typical for that particular headache. So that's the reason why the duration of pain becomes very important. And that's what helps you make your diagnosis. Next, let's talk about what are the phases of migraine. The migraine has a premonitory phase, an aura phase, a headache phase, and something called a postdrome. And we will look at each of them one by one right now in the pathophysiology of each of the sections. The first one is the premonitory phase. So what that is it can start up to 3 days prior to the onset of headache. Common symptoms are fatigue, mood swings, food cravings, yawning, muscle tenderness, and light sensitivity. The hypothesis is the hypothalamus may play a key role in facilitating or intensifying pain transmission during an attack. There are 2 theories that explain this. The first is increased parasympathetic tone that activate the meningeal nociceptors. It could involve modulation of nociceptive signals from the trigeminal nucleus caudalis. That's the one that's most inferior. Oralis, interpolaris, and caudalis. Remember that we talked about it in the first class. So it goes from the trigeminal nucleus caudalis to the supratentorial structures, and that's also involved in the pain mechanism. So the features of migraine like nausea, vomiting, thirst, and cranial autonomic symptoms like lacrimation, that means teary-eyed, having nasal congestion, rhinorrhea, runny nose, they are explained with this particular mechanism. It suggests maybe there is an alteration in the autonomic function. So what happens is many times migraines can get misdiagnosed as sinusitis or a sinus headache. So when you're taking headache history, chances are a patient will tell you, oh, I've been suffering from these sinus headaches for a long time. I've been having sinus problems for a long time. Don't just accept what the patient says. Perhaps they are having sinusitis, but probe the answer a little bit more. Is there pain? The whole history, intensity, location, duration, the whole 9 yards. It is possible that they're actually suffering from migraine and they have been treated for sinus. So what happens, the pathophysiologically, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but we'll just follow along the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are multiple afferents. They carry the parasympathetic signals to the superior salivary nucleus. And then from the superior salivary nucleus, it activates parasympathetic neurons to the sphenopalatine ganglion. And from there, it activates the meningeal nociceptors in the trigeminal vascular pathway that increases the vasodilation, many times mediated by CGRP, and it releases the inflammatory molecules into the meninges. This is what happens in the premonitory phase. Next is the aura phase. About a third of migraine attacks have an aura phase. So what's an aura? According to International Classification of Headache Disorders, it's recurrent attacks lasting a few minutes, unilateral, it's fully reversible. There can be visual components. They are called scotomas, where patients see some kind of shiny objects, shiny fields in their line of sight. Sometimes they can also have a little bit of blindness in the peripheral vision. That would be visual. They can have other kinds of sensory, CNS symptoms. They can develop gradually, and it's typically followed by a headache, or they all start together. Patient can have aura followed by a headache, or they can have everything together. So if there is anybody in the audience who are migraineurs or who have family members who have migraines, I think you might be understanding what exactly I'm talking about. Common aura symptoms, like I said, visual disturbances, they are called scintillations or scotomas. It's the shiny things that people see in the visual field. They can be sensory disturbances, speech or language problems. People can suffer aphasia, forget that they are able to speak, say nonsense words. They can be motor disturbances, weakness, and this whole aura phase can last up to 60 minutes. Next is the headache phase. And the throbbing pain of migraine is caused by activating the trigeminal vascular pathway. So if you have a migraine patient, typically if you ask them what's the quality of pain, they will say that it's throbbing pain. And if you are a migrainer yourself, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The trigeminal vascular pathway conveys nociception from meninges to the brain. It all starts with the release of CGRP. This is what I said earlier today, that CGRP is a very important component in the pathophysiology of migraine, and it leads to peripheral and central sensitization. We talked about these concepts in the basic concept, and we also talked about it when we talked about neuropathic pain. Sometimes when patients have severe migraine or chronic migraineurs, they even tell you it hurts to comb my hair. They can barely touch their head. As diseases go, yes, trigeminal neuralgia is pretty cruel, but for chronic migraineurs, this is pretty cruel too. It's very, very painful. And here is another concept that I think we should all be familiar with. It's called cortical spreading depression, CSD. So what is CSD? It's characterized by slow propagating way of depolarization. It happens in the neuronal cells or in the glia cells, and it's followed by inhibition of cortical activity. Could last up to 30 minutes. And there is an increase in the K plus in the cells, which causes repeated depolarization and repolarization. And that's how the signal is propagated. How it happens, I'm told, or according to my reading, it's not completely understood, but then there are several hypotheses. They think maybe it could be because of interstitial diffusion of potassium ions or glutamate, but then there is more recent hypothesis. They say that it is propagated through the glial cells. Just need to understand that it's the propagation of K plus cells in the cortex. Cortical spreading depression, again, an important concept in migraine pathophysiology. And I think that is something that is important to know. Next, what happens in the propagation of migraine? There is peripheral trigeminal ganglion afferent that get activated in the meninges and in the big cerebral arteries. And then that goes on to the afferents from the skin and muscles of neck and in the neurons of the trigeminal cervical complex, and they all arrive from the meninges and the cerebral vasculature. So from there are multiple connections from the trigeminal cervical complex to the brainstem, to the hypothalamus, to the basal ganglia. And because there are multiple connections, the typical way a patient suffers migraine is very, very different. Yes, there is diagnostic criteria, migraine without aura, migraine with aura, which I will be talking about. Yes, there are very, very well-defined criteria, but no two patients' migraine look the same. So one patient may have visual auras, some patients may have aphasia, some patients may have a lot of fatigue, some patients may have a combination of things. It doesn't necessarily mean everybody suffers the same thing the same way all the time. There generally is a lot of differences between the patients. And that's another thing that you want to ask your patients about what the headache looks like to them. It's called the phenotype of the headache. And why is that important? We will talk about it a little bit later, because if there is a change in phenotype, it is a big red flag, and I will cover that in just a minute. But know that no two migraineurs generally suffer the same, and ask the patient what their migraine looks like. And that's very important part of history taking. So when we add up everything, the premonitory phase, the aura phase, the headache phase, and post-ROM, and post-ROM typically is when the headache is over and patients say they feel like they are hungover, you can see that the patients are in a migraine cycle all the time. Especially if they suffer something more than 15 migraine days a month, you can see that they are in the soup all the time. They are in pain all the time. Like I said, of the pain disorders, migraine can be pretty cruel. Next, let's move on to the classification of migraine. And we have migraine with aura, migraine without aura. We also have hemiplegic migraine, basilar migraine, retinal migraine. We won't be talking about that. But for our purposes, migraine with aura, migraine without aura is important. And then there is episodic migraine, that's less than 15 headache days a month. And then there is chronic migraine with more than 15 headache days a month. And we will see in the future that if a patient has migraine for more headache days for over 8 days, we should really be thinking about preventive therapy because, like I just said, the patient will be in the soup of pain all the time. Next, moving on to the diagnostic criteria. First one is migraine without aura. And again, this is come straight from International Headache Society. It's also called common migraine. So there should be at least 5 attacks, headaches that last anywhere from 4 to 72 hours, either untreated or unsuccessfully treated. And unilateral, they say for migraine, typically unilateral, but about 40% can be bilateral. Keep that in mind. But again, according to International Headache Society, unilateral pulsating or throbbing quality, moderate to severe intensity, and it's aggravated by routine physical activity. So when you're asking your history, for sure ask them, is the headache worsened by routine physical activity? If they say yes, there is a case to be made that it is migraine. Sometimes when patients give headache history, they will say, actually, no, walking or going out for a walk makes me feel better. If they say that, there is a good possibility it's not a migraine. During headache, the patient can have either nausea or vomiting, or they can have photophobia or phonophobia. That means light sensitivity or sound sensitivity. Keep that in mind. Unilateral, pulsating quality, moderate to severe, worsened by routine physical activity, very, very important. Nausea and/or vomiting, light or sound sensitivity. Next, let's move on to migraine with aura. And again, likely to have fully reversible aura symptoms, visual, sensory, I kind of talked about it. Motor, brainstem, retinal, kind of talked about that just a bit. And they should have at least some of these characteristics. One aura symptoms that spreads gradually over more than 5 minutes. They can have 2 or more auras. They can happen one after the other. And each individual symptom can last anywhere from 5 to 60 minutes. At least one aura symptom is unilateral. The aura is accompanied or followed by, within 60 minutes, by a headache. The other thing that I told you was, patient can absolutely have a headache without aura, or patient can have aura that is not followed by a headache. Those things can for sure happen. Next, we'll talk about this concept called neurovascular orofacial pain. So what's that? I want to make it very clear that this is not a diagnosis. I will repeat myself. Neurovascular orofacial pain is not a diagnosis. There is some group that is pushing to make it a diagnosis, but as of right now, to the best of my knowledge, it is not. But it is something I want you to be aware of it because it directly affects us as a dentist, and you're going to see right now why. You may also hear terms called facial migraine or mid-face migraine. They're more or less talking about the same thing. So if you see in literature, especially older literature, you might see mid-face migraine or even facial migraine. Again, remember neurovascular orofacial pain. They're talking about very similar phenomenon. So what it is patient can have face pain with migraine. But standalone facial migraine is very, very rare. Very, very rare. But it doesn't mean it cannot happen. It's important because it can mimic pulp disorders. That is why it is important. If there is a pulp problem, patient is definitely going to come to us asking for help. So what are the clinical features? It's again typically unilateral. It can shift side, but bilateral is pretty rare. Intraorally, it can occur in teeth, in alveolar process, and in the mucosa. It can be referred to periorbital around the eye, perioral around the mouth, preauricular areas in front of the ear. Again, strong, throbbing, episodic pain. It can wake patients from sleep. The pain can last from minutes to hours. It's rare for it to hang on for more than 24 hours. It can be accompanied by tearing, nasal congestion, fullness, and sweating, and patient can have sensitivity to cold. I hope some of these features are starting to sound like pulp pain, not able to sleep, feeling pain in the tooth, in the mucosa, sensitivity to cold. And pain sort of comes and goes, it's throbbing. I hope it is starting to sound a little like pulpal pain. And that's why patient will come and consult with us. And that's why I believe we have to know what it is that we are looking at. Next, we'll talk about warning signs, caution signs, and comfort signs in patient's headache history. Again, when we have the history and exam, that's when the rubber hits the road. If the headaches happen in several different locations, it's probably not a tumor. If they are able to see auras with the eyes closed, it's very unlikely that they have any kind of eye disease. Again, this is an important slide, so please pay attention. Anytime the patient has an abrupt onset of headache, they can be having either a CNS hemorrhage, maybe there is a reversible vasoconstriction, could be a mass or a lesion. Well, we may not really be seeing a patient who is younger than 5 years old with a new headache pattern, but then we might see patient who is over 50 years old who have headaches, chronic pain patients. So if you see a patient in your office who is over 50 years old, they have headache, change in the pattern of headache, change in the phenotype of headache, that is a big, big raging red flag. Please pay attention to it and get the patient the help that they need. Now, according to this particular paper by KD, the differential diagnosis can be tumor or it can be giant cell arthritis. A tumor, again, as we know, it's not a fun thing to have. And giant cell arthritis, if it is not treated in time, it can lead to permanent blindness. So, change, abrupt onset headache, change in pattern, change in phenotype, please take it as a big, big raging red flag. It's not something to be trifled with. Like I just said, if there is new onset, change in the existing headache pattern, consider medication overuse headache, which we will be talking about next week. Consider the possibility there might be a mass or a lesion. There could be a CNS infection. And if there are any neurological signs or symptoms, could be a primary or metastatic lesion, infection, connective tissue disorder, intracranial hypertension. If there has been trauma, maybe there is hemorrhage, there could be artery dissection. If it's accompanied by fever, there could be systemic infection, encephalitis. Again, some of this may not really walk into our clinic, especially in primary care settings for a dentist. Again, this particular paper was written by a doctor, a neurologist, for other neurologists and primary care doctors. But for our particular purposes in chronic pain and chronic pain settings, just know that if there is change in the pattern or in the phenotype, the patient is having more headaches, more frequent headaches, or the headache came out of nowhere, that's a really, really big raging red flag. And that is not something I want you to trifle with. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but it's just that I want to be sure that this particular thing really sticks in the brain. Change in pattern, new onset headaches, patients over 50 years. It is not good news. If again, headaches are accompanied by weight loss, consider malignancy, systemic disease, consider inflammatory or rheumatologic disease, hypertensive crisis. Again, we might not see in our office as a dentist, but we could easily be seeing pregnant patients. So consider toxemia, pituitary apoplexy. Again, not something you want to be trifling with. For headaches that are triggered by exertion, cough or Valsalva maneuver, mass or lesion, subarachnoid hemorrhage, again, we might not see headaches post lumbar puncture or intracranial hypotension. But again, this is what the article said, so I put it in there. So I've been talking about red flags and warning signs, and and don't be trifling with this, that, and the other. I think maybe it's time for a little good news. We'll talk about what are comfort signs. What is it that when you see in a patient, you can reassure yourself and you can reassure the patient that everything is okay. So if the headache is very stable, it's the same headache, same pattern, same frequency, same duration for over 6 months, that is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, that is a comfort sign. Doesn't mean anything is wrong, anything big is wrong. If there is variability of headache location, and if there is a long history of the same headache, it's okay. Or if the headache is exacerbated during menstruation, fine. And if the patient is able to return to baseline functions between headaches, again, that's a comfort sign. If there is a positive family history, there is normal physical and neurological exam, and there is some amount of consistency to the patient's history. Is there any trigger by hormonal cycle? Is it triggered by specific foods? Is there specific sensory input like lights or odors? Or does patient get headache because of changes in the weather, the barometric pressure? And sometimes patients are very perceptive to their own selves. They will actually tell you when the weather changes, I get a headache, or I get a headache when it's time for my periods. And if the same headache has been happening for years and years and years, that's probably nothing to be worried about. It's only a problem when things change or things abruptly start, or if the patient's over 50 years. Next, we'll talk about treatment, and the treatment can be divided as acute or abortive treatment, that would be for episodic, and preventive treatment. The thing is, we can talk about migraine treatment for at least 2 hours, at least 2 hours. I'll just give some general guidelines because I'm not 100% sure what medications are available in India, especially combination medications. And I know for sure some combinations that are available in India, I don't think they're available in the US. And then some medication combination, especially opioid combinations, I don't think it's available in India, although I could be wrong. So I'll keep this pretty general. So first, we'll talk about acute or abortive treatment. That's typically for patients who suffer episodic migraines, and that would be less than 15 headache days a month. Best level A evidence, acetaminophen, aspirin, ibuprofen, is good old NSAIDs. Well, guess acetaminophen is not an NSAID, but the others are. Naproxen and triptans. Triptans again is a class of drugs. I have not talked about it before, and I will, I think, in the next, or maybe in the next couple of slides. Just know that triptans is a class of medication. Sumatriptan, rizatriptan, naratriptan, fovatriptan. There are very many, and I will talk about them. I think it's coming in a couple of slides. Level B evidence is for dihydroergotamine. If patient has nausea or vomiting, you can go either with chlorpromazine or metoclopramide, ketoprofen, ketorolac, or some other options. And then for level C, there is evidence of valproate or ergotamine. As promised, we'll talk about the group of medications called triptans. For example, sumatriptan, that was the first ever triptan. And then after that, several came, like rizatriptan, naratriptan, fovatriptan, zolmatriptan. How do they work? They act on the serotonin 1B and 1D receptors, and they cause potent vasoconstriction. Remember when we talked about migraine pathophysiology, we talked about CGRP, about how their vasodilation, they work the opposite. They cause potent vasoconstriction. And because they do that, in any vascular disease, hypertension, myocardial infarction, elderly, seizures, postmenopausal people, obese people, it's contraindicated. And do not use them with ergots, because ergots also work in a very similar way and you don't want any additive effects. Side effects, generally nausea, vomiting, paresthesia, and xerostomia. When in doubt, for sure involve the patient's medical doctor or call for a medical consult. The other thing I wanted to mention about vascular disease and triptans, there was a recent article in the American Headache Society journal, Headache, where one doctor made a case for you could do it. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I particularly feel very comfortable giving triptan to a patient with a history of vascular disease. I would probably send them back to their MD, or I would have a medical consult before I wrote a script. And that is something I guess I would suggest for you as well. Just be cautious. And like I said before, if a patient has more than 8 headache days a month, you can make a case for preventive therapy. Remember, we talked about the premonitory phase, the aura phase, the headache phase, and postrom. That lasts for about few days, depending on how you calculate. So if the patient has 8 headache days a month, that's more or less 2 headaches a week, and they're having pain the whole time. And like I said, migraines can be pretty cruel and they can be extremely debilitating. And if you can make your patient's life a little better, I think that is something we should try. And we can put them on preventive therapy. So what medications do we have for preventive therapy? There is level A evidence for anticonvulsants like divalproex or topiramate, or they can go on beta blockers like propranolol or metoprolol. There is level B evidence for amitriptyline, venlafaxine, or atenolol. And then the last few years, I would say about 10 years, onabotulinum toxin or Botox has become a big player in migraine preventive therapy. So how did that happen? When patients started getting injections for smoothing out wrinkles, they started reporting that they were having relief from their headaches. So clinical trials were done. This PREEMPT protocol, you will probably see that in literature, and that's the protocol that is being used now. It's research evaluating migraine prophylaxis therapy. They found that particular protocol to be very effective, and we'll take a look in the next couple of slides as to what it is. It was then approved by European Medicine Agency and the Food and Drug Administration in the US. But it's important to know that it does not work in episodic migraine and it does not work in tension type headache. It's only for chronic headache, okay? Chronic migraine, actually. So this particular Botox study asked the question for patients with chronic migraine, is treatment with Botox effective and well tolerated? So they looked at patients with chronic migraine, with and without medication overuse, and they put Botox 155 units to 195 units, compared it to placebo or other prophylactic treatment. And the outcome they were looking for is there meaningful reduction of headache days? That means more than 30% reduction from baseline with acceptable side effects. Excuse me. And what did they find is that it was a 24-week placebo-controlled phase. It was 32-week open label extension. They administered Botox in 12-week intervals. So that's about 3 months. And they injected in 31 sites. That's 5 units per injection. And then the total dose that they administered was anywhere from 155 to 195 units. And they injected it 31 to 39 sites. So this is the PREEMPT protocol that I was talking about. 31 to 39 sites, 155 to 195 units. And where did they administer that? And this is the picture. And it's straight out of the American Headache Society website. As you can see, they had a couple of sites above the eyebrows on each side. Between the eyebrows, they had some sites on the temporalis, in the occipital, in the back, trapezius, way up trapezius, and also on the shoulders, 3 on each side. This is straight out of American Headache Society website. And this is the PREEMPT protocol, and these are the sites where Botox was injected, 5 units per site. And the recommendation is Botox is effective and it's well tolerated. Patients should have tried 2 or 3 other migraine prophylactics previously. That's a criteria to switch the patient to Botox. And chronic migraine patients, unfortunately, they also have other comorbidities. So if they have cardiovascular disease, depression, obesity, they might not tolerate many of the medications. And we also need to manage medication overuse headache. We'll definitely be talking more about it next class. But for right now, no, medication overuse headache also goes by the name rebound headache. That is, when a patient has any kind of headache, migraine, tension type headache, they keep taking the acute medications. What happens is that instead of getting headache relief, they get worsening of headache, a secondary headache, that is a medication overuse headache or rebound headache. I swear we will talk about it a lot more next class. But for right now, know that patients that have chronic migraine may very well also be having medication overuse headache, and that also needs to be managed. So there is no one particular answer that we can hang our hat on. Headache is complicated, and patients come to us with many different permutations and combinations. So we just have to treat the patient according to what they tell us. Ideally, the patient should be withdrawn from all of their acute medication, but I can tell you that doesn't always work. When I have remember telling patients that it's better they stop all the acute medication, they really looked at me like I had 3 heads. You might not always get compliance, but you do have to educate the patient and tell them that their acute medication itself is causing them pain. Sometimes patients listen to it, sometimes they don't. But then once you start the withdrawal, you can start putting the patient on Botox and follow the PREEM protocol. And consider a higher dose if a patient is not responsive before throwing the towel and saying, okay, I guess this patient is a non-responder to Botox. The other medications that has come in a big way, and I think it has probably been around 2018, so really not that long, that's the CGRP targeted treatments. So when I said in the beginning what CGRP was about, I said it's very important in migraine treatment, and this is why. So the CGRP medications can either be anti-CGRP to the molecule itself, or it can be antagonist to the CGRP receptors. And they are all monoclonal antibodies or MABs. Some example is erinzumab, that is anti-CGRP receptors. It's given subcutaneous, 70 milligrams, 1 to 2 doses. Or it can be fremanzumab or galcanzumab. That's also given parenterally, either 225 milligrams for fremanzumab or 240 milligrams for galcanzumab, and they are antagonists to the CGRP molecule. What are the side effects? They can have injection site reactions and constipation. And if the patient has constipation, they actually have to be admitted to the hospital to help them relieve. And I remember when the CGRP first came out, everybody was talking about, oh, it has no side effects, it has no side effects. It particularly targets the CGRP molecule or the receptors only in the brain. There are no side effects, nothing will happen. And then come to find out post-marketing research that constipation is a big side effect. And if the patient has constipation, they have to be hospitalized, and that needs to be taken care of. And it's important to know that. Then becomes a question of how available is CGRP worldwide. Because if 10% of the population has migraine, that is debilitating. How available is CGRP? I don't know. And what are the costs? To the best of my knowledge, CGRP is very, very expensive. In US, insurance companies don't necessarily cover the treatment. They really put you through the ringer before they even say, okay, you can try. You have to speak to the insurance company doctor, and it's like giving a viva. They ask you all kinds of questions. How long has the patient had it? What have you tried? What haven't you tried? What are the side effects? It's really like taking a viva with the insurance doctor. And then they might either accept or they might not accept. And then they'll say, well, we cover 50%, we cover 10%. And then you see the patient's copay, that runs into thousands of dollars. So cost is a problem. And that, I imagine that is the same problem worldwide. That would be the disadvantage. But as we have seen so far, it seems to be helping a lot of patients who have chronic migraine. So that's something to think about, I guess. So the key points in this particular presentation, I've said it before at the cost of repeating myself, take careful history. Confirm the pattern. Is it the same headache over the last 6 months? If there is a change in the pattern, if there is a change in the phenotype, that means how the patient suffered the headache, or what the headache looks like. If the headache started right out of nowhere, or if the patient is over 50 years old, none of it is good news. I've been saying this, I'll say it again. Change in pattern, change in phenotype, sudden onset, over 50 years, none of it is good news. Please probe it some more and get the patient the help that they need. And neurovascular orofacial pain, like I said, it's not a diagnosis, but it can mimic pulp pain. So when you have a patient in your chair telling you that they have tooth pain, and you don't see anything wrong with the tooth, as in there is no caries close to the pulp, there is no filling close to the pulp, there is no crown prep, there is no bridge, work through your endodiagnosis flowchart. That's what it's there for. And that's what, as dentists, we are all extremely good at doing. Go through palpation, percussion, do the cold test, electric pulp test, check the mobility, check pockets, do the tooth sleuth. After all that, and again, while you're doing all that, do it to the opposing, do it to the contra, do it to the adjacent tooth, just so you have an overall picture of if there is a referred pain from teeth that are adjacent to it or in the opposing arch. Also go through the head and neck examination, examine the muscles. And I'm not going to go completely over non-odontogenic toothaches, but just remember to go over your diagnostic workup slowly, carefully, without missing any steps. And differential diagnosis and trial therapy, they might very well be your best friend. We talked about it a little bit when we talked about neuropathic pain. But again, like I said, if patients have chronic pain and they have been suffering chronic pain for a very, very long time, they might not actually check all the boxes for any particular headache. So when you get history, they might be having some characteristics of migraine, they might have some characteristics of tension type headache, some characteristics of attack. Then you're looking at it and going, so what's the final diagnosis? That's when you do trial therapy, and then you kind of work your way backwards. That may very well be your best friend at this point. And then run a drug interaction before prescribing. There are tons of resources online. Just put drug interactions on your Google search box. You'll get many, many websites. A lot of them are fairly reliable. Make sure you've put all the medications, both over the counter, prescribed, any herbals if they even take. Make sure that you put everything, run the drug interaction. Again, when in doubt, always work with the patient's primary care doctor or a neurologist, especially if you're thinking about prescribing anti-epileptic drugs or beta blockers, especially beta blockers, because they do mess with the person's cardiac system. And I'm not personally very, very comfortable prescribing anti-epileptic drugs. So when I have a case for prescribing those medications to patient, I'd much rather really speak with the patient's doctor or send the patients back to their primary care doctor. So my concluding remarks, in outpatient setting, we may really not see life-threatening emergencies with respect to headaches, but patients that have tumors, patients that are in hypertensive crisis, or pregnant patients, they can very well walk into your clinic, and they do. Again, good history and exam are very, very critical, and trust your instincts. If something in your instinct says this doesn't sound right, probe it a little bit more and get the help that you need. And again, never be too proud to ask for second opinion. I don't think anyone's judging you harshly. Rather, you take extra care, protect yourself, protect your license before you go to do something. I don't think any doctor ever goes with the intention of harming the patient, but sometimes you don't know. The patient may not be honest with you, or there are a lot of atypical situations. So I'd much rather you be careful and instead of not doing your due diligence. With that, I will take your questions. Are there any questions?
Request Dr. Joshi sir to take over. Dr. Joshi sir or Dr. Srinath sir, please.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you very much for your wonderful and again a very informative lecture. As of now, I think there are a few questions with Dr. Subhash. He has it. He will push it on. In the meanwhile, I would like to convey regards from Dr. Murli, Dr. Shashikala, who have put in their comment here. Dr. Murli says it was just brilliant, dear Priya. Crisp, crystal, and keep educating. This is what his message is for you. And he has been sending these message after every seminar to us. I was not reading it out for you. And
thank you, Dr. Murli sir. So sweet.
And there's one comment from Dr. Shashikala. She says it was very informative and excellent webinar.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, there is Dr. Karishma who has a question here. She has come across the right side migraine pain severe to left side. Is that true? If so, why?
Yeah, that can happen. Again, it depends on the way the pain signals are propagated. A migraine can absolutely be bilateral, and then one side can be worse than the other. It happens.
Okay, then. Just.
Yes, Joshi. Dr. Priya, can you hear
Yes.
me? Yeah. Okay. Like I had two questions. Have you come across patients who are suffering with TMD having a specific type of headache, or what type of headache usually they come with in your experience?
They can come with anything, actually. So TMD patients, they can have headache due to TMD. That's a diagnostic criteria in our DCTMD criteria. They can have headache due to sleep apnea. They can absolutely have migraines. They can have tension type headache. They can have a headache due to sleep apnea. Did I say that? They can have a medication overuse headache. They can have cervicogenic headache. Very rarely they have TACs, but they can have TACs too. So, yeah, a lot.
Okay.
And that's the reason why I said, that's the reason why I said the patient may not check all the boxes of a diagnostic criteria, and it looks like they're actually having 2 or 3 different headaches, and to slowly work your way through a differential diagnosis.
Okay. But there is no, you have not come across like this type of headache is more common in TMD people and compared to the general population. You have not come across any such associations.
No. They can have absolutely anything.
Because here what we see is more of this, the headache will be associated with some kind of cervical muscle ache. And that is what I have come across in our institution here. And yes, history of migraine would be there. So that's why I was curious to know what you have encountered.
The other thing to remember with cervicogenic headache is sometimes it co-opts feature of migraine or tension type headache.
Okay. One more thing, one more doubt. Like, say you are in a dental office where you told that multidisciplinary team is.
Yeah, Dr. Subhash, I lost you.
Yeah, I think there's some internet issue there, man. Don't worry. Either he or Dr. Joshi will be there. Dr. Subhash or Dr. Joshi will always be there.
Illa. We are not able to hear.
Can you hear me?
No. Mute again.
Yes. Now we can hear.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The question was question was if the patient comes to you with headache and TMD, who will be treating him?
If the patient comes to the office with headache and TMD, who is treating? Is that the question? Did I get it correctly?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So what happens is go through the history taking, get all the history with the TMD, get all the history with the headache, and see what your comfort level is. You should be comfortable treating TMD, no question about it. But when it comes to headache, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and treat it. First of all, have a diagnosis. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and treat it. Otherwise, you can refer them to a neurologist or a primary care doctor. Really not a problem.
Okay, neurologist would be the one who will be doing it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because here in our institution, we will not have a facility for a neurologist to come over. So most of times we will be wondering whom to refer them. Okay, so a neurologist is a person who will be dealing with these issues.
Yeah. So let's say you find a neurologist, definitely ask them what their subspecialty in neurology is. They can have anything like Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, headaches, stroke. Stroke is very popular. So when you do meet a neurologist, ask them what their subspecialty is, and is headache something that they do? And if they do, definitely keep their number and refer them patients. They would be very thankful for it.
Okay, Dr. Priya. So I think that's it today. I request Dr. Asha Iyengar, our principal, to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, so good morning to everybody again, and thanks Priya for that wonderful lecture. I think we do get a lot of patients that we are dealing with orofacial pain who also have concomitant headache. So I think you gave a very good overview about the various spectrum of headache related problems that we can encounter. So once again, like Dr. Murli and Dr. Shashikala said, it was a very crisp and clear, gave us a very clear and crisp understanding of the entire picture. So we are happy that you could again make it suit your time. I know we are having a vast time difference, but still you are managing to, be keep all of us alert and interested in this topic. So once again, thank you for accepting this webinar series, and I'm really glad to have you back again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your closing comments. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our team leader, technical person, Dr. Joshi. Without him, I think we would have had a lot of problems with the internet and connections. Thank you, Joshi. And I would also like to thank Group Pharma, especially Mr. Sunil, for a wonderful lecture what he gave on RV Dental College. It was really a good start. Thank you, Dr. Sunil. And I hope and I expect more lectures like this, short ones to pep us up in the future webinar series. Thank you very much.
Dr. Subhash sir, thank you for your confidence on us. We are always with you. Thank you, Dr. Joshi sir also.
See, I would like to add on to what Dr. Subhash told. We do have two more parts of this lecture, and we will be doing it very shortly. So you're all, we will be announcing the dates as well as time very shortly, and I expect all of you to be here with us as well as bring others also along with you. Thank you very much to one and all. Thank you, Priya. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Do I have the permission to close?
Yeah, close it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priya madam. Thank you, everybody.